Well, certainly one of the major problems associating with the aging population are the medical issues. And there has to be at least some way that we can develop to try and rectify some of the damage that is accumulated in tissues over time. And regenerative medicine is really an attempt to do exactly that. But there is really no alternative. With the rising age of the population, we will require more and more of these different regenerative therapies in time. Well, my name is Paul Fairchild, and I'm co-director of the Oxford Stem Cell Institute, but I'm also based at the Sir William Dunn School of Pathology here in Oxford. The Stem Cell Institute is actually an interdisciplinary institute, which actually involves 43 laboratories from 17 different departments of the university. So it is quite a large institution, and we try to make use of all of the expertise of different people within that within the institute to try and address important medical issues of the 21st century. Well, stem cells are cells which have the capacity to undergo a process of differentiation, to become more and more specialized and to produce cell types which will contribute to the function of a tissue in which they themselves reside. And so the hope is that we may be able to access some of those stem cells and then to use them to regenerate tissues in an individual that has some kind of disease state. There's another population of stem cells which are known as pluripotent stem cells, which have the capacity to make literally every one of the 210 cell types that make up the human body. And so we're particularly interested in focusing in on that population because we could use those to treat many different diseases and a huge number of people as well. There's an awful lot going on, particularly for using both pluripotent but also multipotent stem cells for the treatment of various disease states. My own research is actually involved in trying to address the issues of rejection of those tissues that we differentiate from pluripotent stem cells, which actually is one of the major barriers to actually bringing this into the clinic, because many of these tissues will ultimately be rejected by the recipient. Now that we're able to take just a few cells, perhaps from the skin of an individual, and then to reprogram those back to a state of pluripotency, something that's known as induced pluripotency, we've actually been able to overcome many of the ethical constraints, because up until the publication of that work on induced pluripotency, the only place that we could access those pluripotent stem cells was from human embryos. And so there was a need to make use of embryos that were surplus to requirements in IVF clinics. But now we don't have to make use of embryos at all in this kind of research. There are quite a number of different hurdles to this kind of research. Some of those are ethical hurdles, of course. A lot of those have been resolved over the last few years with new technology known as induced pluripotency. But nevertheless, it is something that we obviously think about a great deal, and we try to work very much within ethical constraints and guidelines. The funding, of course, is another issue that we grapple with. The government has actually been extremely generous in supporting regenerative medicine, but nevertheless it is quite difficult to tap into some of those funding streams. So certainly getting the backing and the financial capacity to do some of this research, which is hugely expensive, is always a challenge.